Okay. Give me I want to order food. And then the rest of this stream is going to be boring as okay? Because we're just going to be reading. I just want to go through all the Federalist Papers, okay? I feel like we can do it in less than a month, all right? I'll be back. I'm going to order something, then we're going to start reading this. Be careful. Oh, look at Asmongold's channel. All right.
In the podcast medium can't be understated here, Michael, because some of the offensive things that we Democrats thought that joke is offensive, the zeitgeist in podcasts is it softens people. Podcast hosts aren't looking for a gotcha moment. They generally want to present the individual in their best light. And it's more got the vibe of, can't you take a joke? And if you look at the 9 of the top 10 podcasts, 8 of they lean right, and Trump went on 6 of them. There's going to be a lot of forensics here, but not acknowledging the struggles of young men as a broader theme will be a very big issue when we look at the autopsy of the failed Harris campaign. And also, simply put, she should have gone on a plane to Austin. The demographic group that swung most violently towards Trump was young people. The second most violent swing was their parents, age 45 to 64. In the podcast medium,
Wow. Less people voted for Trump this year. The issues of masculinity of Dem voters will stop. I don't know. I'm not even sure what it'll end up being. I think we all fell for some fake news there. I don't even know. U.S. presidential election 2020. There was so much fake news on the first night about that 15 million vote shortage. I was like retweeting it. I don't know why I wouldn't imagine. Maybe somebody could just lie about something so. Oh yeah, Trump's already got more votes now than he did last election. See, yeah. That 15 million vote shortage thing, that was just a lie, and everybody just started pushing it, and nobody fact checked anything. So, is it still going to be less votes overall, though? Probably a few less votes would be my guess, because the Democrats are probably going to be anywhere from 5 to 8 million short. I'm not sure. Why is India able to count all the votes in a single day, but not us? And in places, don't a lot of states make it illegal to count votes early? I don't know why that is the case. Sounds like a Republican thing. Okay. Background and history. The Federalist Papers is a collection of 85 articles and essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay under the collective pseudonym Publius Public Supermarkets. Publius. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm curious, actually.
I haven't been any place.
Is it Publius or Publius?
So make sure to stay tuned to the channel if you enjoy learning
I hate
about
this
those.
stupid fucking channel.
In English it is said as Publius.
Publius?
Publius, it's easy. While in Latin that would be said more as Publius. But
Publius. Publius. We're gonna go with Publius. Wait, you had a website for this. True, we did.
This is a way of learning how we might differ from Publius, which is just fine.
Publius. Publius it is. Term about the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. The collection was commonly known as the Federalist until the name, the Federalist Papers, emerged in the 20th century. The first 77 of these essays were published serially in the Independent Journal, the New York Packet, and the Daily Advertiser between October 1787 and April of 1788. A compilation of the 77 essays and 8 others were published in 2 volumes as The Federalist, a collection of essays written in favor of the new Constitution as agreed upon by the Federal Convention, September 17th, 1787. Holy shit, they were already naming their books like post-rock albums. By publishing firm J. and A. McLean in March and May 1788. The last 8 papers, numbers 78 through 85, were republished in the New York newspapers between June 14th and August 16th, 1788. The authors of the Federalist intended to influence the voters to ratify the Constitution. In Federalist number 1, they explicitly set that debate in broad political terms. In Federalist number 10, okay, we don't need to go through these because we'll read them. The Federal Convention, the Constitutional Convention, sent the proposed Constitution to the Confederation Congress, which in turn submitted it to the states for ratification at the end of September 1787. On September 27, 1787, Cato first appeared in the New York press criticizing the proposition. Brutus followed on October 18, 1787. Do you think all these guys, when they were writing to the fucking newspapers, do you think they were all wearing the fucking, the Guy Fawkes masks? Actual fucking losers. These and other articles and public letters critical of the new Constitution would eventually become known as the Anti-Federalist Papers. In response, Alexander Hamilton decided to launch a measured defense and extensive explanation of the proposed Constitution to the people of the state of New York. He wrote in Federalist number 1 that the series would endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all of the objections which shall have made their appearance that may seem to have any claim to your attention. Hamilton recruited collaborators for the project. He enlisted John Jay, who, after 4 essays, fell ill and contributed only 1 more essay, Loser. Jay also distilled his case into a pamphlet in the spring of 1788 and addressed to the people of the state of New York. Hamilton cited it approvingly in Federalist number 85. James Madison, president of New York, as a Virginia delegate to the Confederation Congress, was recruited by Hamilton, and Jay became Hamilton's primary collaborator. Governor Morris and William Duer were also considered. However, Morris turned down the invitation, and Hamilton rejected 3 essays written by Duer. Duer, I don't know if I'm probably this right. Duer later wrote in support of the 3 Federalist authors under the name Philo or Philo Publius, meaning either friend of the people or friend of Hamilton, based on Hamilton's pen name, Publius. Hamilton chose the pseudonym name Publius, while many other pieces representing both sides of the constitutional debate were written under Roman names. Historian Albert Furtwängler, contends that Publius was a cut above Caesar or Brutus or even Cato. At the time of publication, the authors of the Federalist Papers attempted to hide their identities due to Hamilton and Madison having attended the convention. Astute observers, however, correctly discerned the identities of Hamilton, Madison, and Jay. Establishing authorial authenticity of the essays that constitute the Federalist Papers has not always been clear. After Hamilton's death in 1804, a list emerged claiming that he alone had written 2/3 of the Federalist essays. Some believe that several of these essays were written by Madison. The scholarly detective work of Douglas Adair in 1944 postulated the following assignments of authorship, corroborated in 1964 by a computer analysis of the text. The Federalist Papers were written to support the ratification of the Constitution, specifically in New York. Whether they succeeded in that mission is questionable. Separate ratification proceedings took place in each state, and the essays were not reliably reprinted outside of New York. Furthermore, by the time the series was well underway, a number of important states had already ratified it. For instance, Pennsylvania on December 12th. New York held out until July 26th. Certainly, the Federalist was more important there than anywhere else, but Furtwängler argues that it could hardly rival other major forces in the ratification contest. Specifically, these forces included the personal influence of well-known Federalists, for instance, Hamilton and Jay, and anti-Federalists, including Governor George Clinton. Further, by the time New York came to a vote, 10 states had already ratified the Constitution and had thus already passed. Only 9 states had to ratify it for the new government to be established. Among them, the ratification by Virginia, the 10th state, placed pressure on New York to ratify. In light of that, Furtwängler observes, New York's refusal would make that state an odd outsider. Only 19 Federalists were elected to New York's ratification convention, compared to the anti-Federalists' 46 delegates. While New York did indeed ratify the Constitution on July 26th, the lack of public support for pro-Constitution Federalists has led historian John Kaminsky to suggest that the impact of the Federalists on New York citizens was negligible. As for Virginia, which ratified the Constitution only at its convention on June 25th, Hamilton writes in a letter to Madison that the collected edition of the Federalist had been sent to Virginia. Furt Wrangler presumes that it was an act as a debater's handbook for the convention there, though he claims that this indirect influence would be a dubious distinction. Okay, some background. Do I want a note for every single paper, or do I just want... Oh, should I just put them all in one big note? Let's see. Oh, we could do 10 of these per day, probably. Maybe? Yeah, fuck it, why not? Okay. As we read these, I'll try to break down concepts that I understand, and we'll look at things we don't understand. I'll probably just try to explain paragraph by paragraph, okay? For why these things are important, my U.S. history knowledge is not that great. Anything that I learned before this year, actually, we'll just say is not that great. But I believe there was a constitutional convention in the United States where a constitution was drafted with the intention of creating a strong federal government that would be more able to govern, basically, than what we had prior to that, which was the Articles of Confederation. A lot of people attended these constitutional conventions, and then the convention, and then afterwards, the goal was you needed all the states to ratify. Well, not all of them. You only needed, what did I say, 9 of them, to ratify the Constitution, saying, okay, fine, we'll all be part of a bigger country, basically. And part of the people that were at, or some of the people that were at that Constitutional Convention are the authors of a lot of these Federalist Papers. The reason why what they write in the Federalist Papers is important is twofold. One reason can be important, and it's what everybody cites, but I actually think it's the minor reason. And then there's a second incredibly important reason, okay? The first reason that people cite is because it gives you some insight into what they felt and what they thought and what their intention was when they were writing the Constitution. This is like interesting, I think, to know. It's like, okay, cool. And it's what usually people say, don't you want to know what they thought when they wrote it? The second point that I think is far more interesting is that the federal government that we have in the United States and the way that our government is formed, okay, was not by random chance and not by organic evolution out of pre-existing structures. It was a bunch of people that came together that studied the prior governments, the prior republics, the prior democracies, and they saw what worked and they saw what didn't work. And from these ideas, they tried to put together a government that kept like the strongest parts of a strong and vigorous king and executive, and the strongest parts of like a debating republic that represents the people, and the strongest parts of like of all these different things to put together a government that worked as effectively as possible. Something that was like powerful but still guaranteed individual rights. Something that could function as a federal government without infringing on the state's ability to operate right. Nothing in our government is there randomly or by chance. And whatever lessons from history these guys learned, in the 18th century are still there for us to learn. It's not like we've discovered or radically revamped our view of how, the Romans or the Greeks or, the British governed or whatever, or at least that's my understanding is we haven't. So it's good to, even not as like a U.S. history course, it's just good to understand like, oh, these are how other governments have functioned. These are why things are done as they are in our government. It's not random. There's reasons why. But yeah. Okay. Okay. The first author is Alexander Hamilton, Federalist number 1. To the people of the state of New York, after an unequivocal experience of the inefficiency of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire in many respects, the most interesting in the world. This is a very, also, keep in mind when this is being written, this is a very presumptuous statement because the United States means fuck all to the world right now. It's a colony in the Americas. They had a big Revolutionary War that a bunch of other people got drowned. This is a pretty presumptuous statement, right? Who the fuck are you? America? Okay. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question of whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Oh my God. Damn, it feels like I pre-read this. But yes, so they're coming together to form an explicit government, not just like randomly like, oh, well, this guy's a king or these guys are nobles and this is kind of what they're doing. It's not what we're doing, right? It's like, can we come together and think up? Can we theory craft the perfect government, right? Can we theory craft a really good government? If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made, and a wrong decision of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. If we fuck up, maybe this is the only time somebody can sit down and make a whole government, and if we fuck it up, no one's going to do it in the future. And they did. We did make a good government. We were the world leader for a long time, until maybe 5 days ago. This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. Basically, we should all be interested, I think, in the outcome of this, right? Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. We're doing these things not to make an aristocracy? And that's an aristocratic government, not an oligarchy, not a monarchy, but something for the public good, for the public. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. Man, what a guy. This is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. It takes a lot of work to build a good government, right? Like, are you really going to make, like, you want to make a government that represents the public interests of all the different people? Like, yeah, keep dreaming, dipshit. Like, you really expect this to ever happen? Is essentially what he's saying here, right? There's way too many interests involved. You're trying to change way too many local institutions. Like, there's no, like, you really think that these types of discussion will lead you to the discovery of truth? Huh, interesting. That's why people don't really realize this, but Alexander Hamilton was one of the guys that first came out against Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. Did you know that? Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state, in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of the power, emolument, and consequence of the offices they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government, right? So, what's going to fuck us up when we're trying to make a new constitution, right? Well, obviously, it's going to be the people who are already holding a lot of power who are going to have to give some of that power up, right? Which you do as a state. You're going to have to give some power up to a new federal government. That's why a lot of people don't want to join a federal government. Fuck you. You're going to come in, wow, we just fought a revolutionary war against the King Britain, and now you want to make a king federal government? What a horrible idea, right? Some people would have to give up power. Other people might be capitalizing on the separation of our states into different things, and they can have, because of the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies, they might have more power than they would under a unionized federal government, right? It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men, merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views. He's not just trying to write people's opinions off immediately, right? It would be disingenuous to try to say immediately, oh, obviously you're against me, right? Oh, so he's saying I have to argue for this, right? He's saying, listen, you obviously want to hold on to your power. Obviously, you're interested in that. But he's saying, but listen, I understand that. I'm not going to discount your arguments just because of that, right? I'm going to engage with the subject matter. We'll engage with the material, right? Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men may be actuated by upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources, blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. People might have like good incentives to be evil, but they also could just be like wrong. They could be fucked up. They might be incorrect about things. People make mistakes. Even people who are predisposed to gain from not having a federal government could still make really good arguments for why we wouldn't have a federal government. So numerous indeed and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment that we, upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude to society. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so much persuaded of their being in the right in any controversy. So listen, anybody can fuck up, and maybe that means you should like chill a little bit, have a little bit less conviction, be a little bit less 100% sure on a particular thing, because anybody can make a mistake. And a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Different people who are both influenced by good things can come to different conclusions, right? Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question. You could be right for the wrong reasons. Were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has, at all times, characterized political parties. One thing we'll probably find when reading through these, I don't remember Hamilton particularly, but a lot of the Founding Fathers were not fans of political parties. But for in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. You have to change people's minds by arguing against them, not by killing them, right? And yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, and yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this, as in all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to evince the justness of their opinions, and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their declamations and the bitterness of their invectives. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of the public good. Hold on. Everybody's basically going to be so impassioned about these arguments that it's going to be very easy to conclude that the other side is acting with evil, basically, I guess is what. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is apt to be infected with a spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interest can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has found a much more certain road to the induction of despotism than the latter, and that those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. Obsequious court to the people. Is this like a obedient or attentive to the excessive or servile nature? A lot of feelings, emotions, and passions can run hand in hand, like good things and bad things can run hand in hand. There are some people who might use who might use arguments of free speech to spread lies. There might be people who say that they have a mask of zeal for the rights of the people, but there could be a dangerous ambition that's lurking behind that, right? Essentially, yeah. Obsequious. There you go. In the course of the preceding observations, I have had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts from whatever quarter to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time, have collected from the general scope of them that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I own to you that, after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. He's basically saying, like, yeah, listen, obviously I'm a biased party. I'm literally a biased party that's writing this. I am in favor of the new Constitution. Just letting you know that right now. Yeah. I affect not reserves, which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with an appearance of deliberation when I have decided. No fake centrism. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. The consciousness of good intentions disdains ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in the depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all and may be judged by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. I propose in a series of papers to discuss the following interesting particulars: the utility of the Union to your political prosperity, the insufficiency of the present Confederation to preserve that Union, the necessity of a government at least equally energetic with the one proposed, to the attainment of this object, the conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of Republican government, its analogy to your own state constitution, and lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to prosperity. So basically, the arguments are going to be your current confederation sucks, okay? I'm going to argue that you have an insufficient present confederation that does not preserve a union that's necessary, that will be able to act as energetically as the one that he's proposing, okay? That the attainment of the current object it coincides with the true principles of Republican government, and it's analogous to all of the state constitutions, which the people obviously like. They're the Constitution of every state. And then the additional security will be granted basically to the country if everybody adopts the current constitution. It'll make everybody's lives better insofar as that it secures more liberty and prosperity, right? Or property, sorry. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all the objections which shall have made their appearance that may seem to have any claim to your attention. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of the Union, a point, no doubt, deeply engraved on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which it may be imagined has no adversaries. But the fact is that we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct portions of the whole. So basically, like, I'm sure like a lot of us are thinking like, man, we're a union, you know, we're so cool. We're beating the British and all this cool shit. But I mean, like, in terms of being a strong whole country, I don't know, will all the states be on board with it? Apparently, they feel like not everybody is on board with that. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has votaries enough to countenance an open avowal of it. For nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of an adoption of the new Constitution or a dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that Union, the certain evils, and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Okay, so basically, the opening Federalist paper is essentially Hamilton introducing himself as someone who is openly supporting the Constitution. He warns people that many arguments will be made on both sides, both in favor and against, that will be made. I don't need to, that's repetitive. Made both in favor and against a stronger union, and to warn against people assuming bad intentions by either side, but also to be careful as good things can hide bad intentions. I don't know, it's pretty general, pretty vague, pretty whatever. Okay. Oh shit. Hold on, my food's here. 1 sec. Okay, fuck. Give me something to watch while we eat. Well, I eat, not we. You don't get my food. The AV1 video codec, 42 minutes. Hank Green, election takes.
I probably shouldn't be making this video, but I want to make a video that's called The Best and Worst Election Takes I Saw, or whatever the title of this video is. Because I saw some real stinkers, but I also saw what I thought were good ones. And I felt like that might be helpful for people to hear my thoughts about those thoughts. And also just to be exposed maybe to some of the better pieces of analysis. But though I will admit, everything I'm going to show you in this video is a tweet. So don't expect it to be high level. I'm me. I'm not a political scientist, but I'm going to start with just terrible takes. And then we're going to get through to some pretty good ones and then really good ones. That's how the structure of the video is going to be. And we're just going to start with terrible. And I have a folder on my desktop. It's called Terrible. The first one is from Mike Lee, who's an actual US senator, which is the reason why this is such a terrible take. If it was just some person, I'd be like, okay, 70,000 people liked this tweet. Is there any credible, non-suspicious explanation for Arizona and Nevada taking this long to count votes? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. But if I would add to that answer, I would add, you're a senator! Just ask somebody! You have resources at your...
You're literally a federal senator. You have staff, you have so many resources available to you to answer this question.
disposal, Mike! You can find out how the election systems in Nevada and Arizona work. Yep. You've been a senator since 2011! You know how elections work! This is not in good faith! But 70,000 people liked it. Next tweet. How do you call any election when you have U.S. intelligence concluding a foreign adversary has interfered? This is true. The U.S. intelligence did conclude that a foreign adversary has interfered a little bit, one way or another. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but like somebody who is probably based in Russia called in some bomb threats to some polling places.
Come on. Is that a big deal? I'm getting a fork. Hold up. What's a little bomb threat between friends?
Is at the very least. But Jack, and also the 63,000 others of you, that's not how it works. We can say for sure in this case that it didn't matter, like if that makes you feel any better. But even if the Russian government somehow influenced the vote of the US through bomb threats or whatever, you do have to accept the results that came in. If it wasn't the ideal situation, it still happened and we have to continue to do America. You don't get to not certify the election because Russia did some stuff. You don't get to not certify the election because social media companies did some stuff. You have to just have it go how it goes, and then you can try and fix those problems later. But Russia isn't going to stop meddling in US elections. And yet we still have to do democracy, even with the world being imperfect around that. Karen says, okay, remember when Donald Trump said, don't vote, it's okay, we have all the votes we need. Something's not right about this. 113,000 likes. Like, I understand trying to make sense of a world that you didn't want to live inside of, but 113,000 people shouldn't be liking this tweet. That's a lot of likes for a tweet. I looked this up and I looked at the speech where he said this, and it was clear to me that Donald Trump is not always the best at talking, and he was trying to cover up a flub. And I just want to say to all the people who are going to use those two tweets that I just showed and say, the Democrats also deny elections. This is going to be important. Listen, this is some person named Karen Watson, and this was some guy named Jack. And none of the people who are actually in charge and have power in this situation are taking that and running with it. Kamala Harris conceded graciously, and democracy is working the way that it should. Right? What happened in the other case? A different thing happened. And Donald Trump has still never said that he lost. And when you ask him why he thinks he won, he gives any number of responses that have all been disproven in one way or another, or are not legitimate, like saying that a media company making a decision is a reason why we shouldn't certify an election. The first one that's not from Twitter, I'm pretty sure this is from Threads. We are officially in the movie Idiocracy. Again, for the 80th time, Idiocracy is about eugenics. The whole point of the movie is that rich people don't breed and poor people do. And I'll note, I did just say rich and poor, not smart and stupid. But then what happens, because the rich people didn't breed and the poor people did, the whole world gets stupid. I understand it's a comedy movie and I'm fine with it as a comedy movie, but when we start to apply it to the real world, that's got some bad vibes. But this is a map showing that more highly educated states are more likely to vote for Democrats. And I think that's true. And I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with intelligence. I think it has a lot to do with a backlash against existing systems. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of things that I'm not going to get into right now. But this is a terrible take to say it's because people are stupid. We're going to see that take again in a slightly better form later on. 70,000 likes on this one. I really only picked ones that had a lot of likes when it came to the bad takes, because there's lots of bad takes that don't get a lot of likes, but I feel like the ones that get a lot of likes are worth paying attention to. Matt Walsh says, now that the election is over, I think we can finally say that, yeah, Project 2025 is the agenda, lol. Two things about that. First, Matt Walsh's job is not to do government policy, it's to get attention on the internet. He will say anything to get attention on the internet, and that's what he's doing right now. But I do think that it is the case that many things in Project 2025, which is a very long document, will be things that the Trump administration tries to do. And the fact that Trump was like, I have no idea what that is, and I've never read it, and there are some good things in it and some bad things in it, and I'm like, how did you know that if you've never read it and you don't know what it is? I think that was a lie, and I think it was bad. An Onion person here says, I think that the left and especially Democrat liberals need to internalize that intentionally lying is an incredibly useful and good political strategy. I think that Donald Trump is exceptionally good at lying, not just because he's like good at lying, but because he like says everything. He just like constantly talks. And so people are kind of like, well, you can't really take him at his word because he says, like, he's like being a person. He's just off the cuff, you know? So there's a reason why this is a pretty bad take, which is that this can be a good or bad strategy depending on the electorate you're trying to win and the candidate that you have doing the lying. I think that those things matter a great deal with regards to whether lying is a strategy. I think this is a terrible take because we shouldn't do that. I don't know. Call me old-fashioned. So we're going to move on to the pretty good takes. These were like, okay, pretty good takes. Let's check out what we got here. The first one, this one's from
Me.
Blue Sky.
Fuck
and
you.
he says, one of the things I keep circling back to is all of the terrible people, actions, and ideas that people will now claim were validated. Like the tweet that we just saw. Trump, Thiel, and all the worst impulses of the worst parts of the tech wealth class, Vance, and all this will now be seen as good, successful strategy. And I think there is a bit of this, because I experienced this too, despite the fact that I think this is a pretty good take. I think there's a bit of this that is probably about like the feeling of losing. There's all these things that were like exceptionally annoying to me in particular. You know, Netanyahu's strategy, Bezos's cowardice, etc. Like those things in particular that annoyed me, I'm like experiencing the loss in an additional weighted way. That makes me think this is probably not that big of a deal because it's more about an emotional reaction that I have. And I can't speak for Jacob, but it's more about an emotional reaction that I have when I'm like, we lost. And we didn't just lose the election. We also lost the story. And now I have to like live in the world where these people who I think are acting very badly are feeling like their bad action is actually successful and good, and they're having their champagne parties and living it up. And I also experienced that. It just feels very emotional to me, which makes me think it's probably not that big of a deal. Brian Stelter. This is an interesting one. This is a two-parter from Twitter. It's a mistake to dismiss real dissatisfaction with the economy and the government as merely a product of right-wing propaganda, but it is also a mistake to ignore the mis- and disinformation that permeates pro-Trump media from top to bottom, for example. And then he shows this Ipsos poll from last month. People who answered factual questions about inflation, crime, and immigration incorrectly were more likely to opt for Trump, and those who answered correctly were more likely to be Harris voters. And you can see this graphic here, and it's a pretty wide swing. So like a 85-point swing when it comes to crime, a 30% swing when it comes to the stock market, and like a 70% swing when it comes to US-Mexico border stuff. Now I think this is a pretty good take because I'm very much on the team of the information environment is terrible. There isn't a way to get good information to people anymore. And most information is tuned to one of two purposes. If it is like on Fox News, it is tuned for a political purpose. Fox News is just an arm of the Republican Party. MSNBC is just an arm of the Democratic Party. Those are tuned for a political purpose. It could additionally be tuned for just gathering and holding on to attention, in which case telling people that like the stock market's pretty good, like that's not going to be good, interesting content. Like there's not an interesting story to be told there. And the greatest bias in all media is toward interesting stories rather than any individual political candidate or ideology. So I agree with it in that way, where I do think the information environment is very bad. And I do also think that if you have a more accurate picture of the situation, you would be more likely to be sympathetic to Vice President Harris. And if you have a less accurate picture, you would be more likely to vote for Donald Trump. But I don't think that this graph necessarily tells us that, because every one of these questions is something that if you want it to be true, then you are a Harris voter. This would only be like a useful tool to actually make Brian's case here if there was something on this list that it would be better for a Harris voter to believe falsely. And that could very well be the case. But to me, what this could also easily just mean, here are a bunch of partisan questions, and people of both parties are likely to believe the thing that is better for their candidate. And in this case, all of them are better for Kamala Harris, and they are also, in addition to that, true. So we need something that is worse for Kamala Harris, but is also true to actually be able to make the case that Brian is making here. Sorry that took me so long to say. Next, pretty good take. As someone who doesn't live in a swing state, I'm going to say this with my full chest. I'm tired of 7 fucking states deciding the fate of 50 states. 623,000 votes. This is a pretty good take because I think that the Electoral College is outdated and we don't need it anymore and we should go by popular vote. And I think that that is becoming a more popular perspective, even, I am surprised to find when I looked it up, among Republicans and independents. But it's only a pretty good take because in this case, it didn't matter. If it was popular vote, the outcome would have been the same. Kat says, since 2020, I've increasingly felt like we're in a digital dark ages where illiteracy is skyrocketing, people believe in magic, disease, and rampant oligarchs rule, and it's all facilitated by ultra-modern technology that has evolved to reinforce it. I think that it is identifying more of a symptom than a disease. And I also think that it is a little bit over the top. I think certainly people believe in magic, like people believe in astrology and crystals and always have. But like, I think that's actually like fewer people right now believe in magic than at most times in history. Disease is rampant, not compared to the Dark Ages. Like we have taken it feels like a little bit of a step back. There are more oligarchs. It is weird to watch Elon Musk very intentionally become an oligarch.
I think the point of her tweet was, in a way, technology has kind of become magic, right? All the devices are spying on you. Everything is hooked up to the government. Every single thing is trying to destroy you. All those social media accounts are being like, so in a way, if she meant that, then yeah.
And I think this is a pretty good take because like all of these things seem of the past, but they are enabled by this ultra-modern technology. And that's really interesting. I just think it's a little over the top. And I think that the connection between these things, between the technology and what has happened, is really strong and needs to be like articulated clearly somehow in a thing that isn't the length of a book. So I've read books about this, but people aren't going to read the books, and they're all by, well, I guess the Yuval Noah Harari book is pretty, whatever the new one is, pretty accessible and meant for a broad audience. The other books I've read that are like by professors and don't really to me feel like they are for a broad audience, but they're great for me. I'm thinking of the Gutenberg Parenthesis by Jeff Jarvis, if you want to check that one out. And also Wrong. There's a book called Wrong that is also interesting in this, and I can't remember who wrote it. Well, I'll put the cover on the screen. And then our last pretty good take is coming from Naval, who I don't usually agree with on anything, but says Elon made being Republican cool again. I think it's only pretty good because I don't think that being a member of either party is cool. And I think that Elon would not himself call himself a Republican. Most people who are in this group of people who are younger, cooler people voting for Donald Trump would call themselves independents, I would guess. But there's something to this. I think that is by far more a bigger piece of Trump's growth than Elon spending money, is Elon being a person who is seen as an exceptional person, normalizing his support for Trump, and an aspirational person for many people. I think it's a pretty good take. I'm not all the way there on it, but like I think that it's worth admitting that many people see Elon Musk as remarkable and aspirational, and that his full-throated support for Donald Trump and full body dive into conspiracy theory, specifically around voting stuff and immigration, it has really normalized that stuff for a lot of people and is a strong force for the specific kind of populism that Trump and Musk currently are embodying and representing. I think it's worth interfacing with everybody. And then we're going to move on to our actually, I think, very good takes. But before we get to
This is what he was saving all of my takes for. Thank you.
the good takes, this video is brought to you by Good.Store. And specifically, it's brought to you by Good.Store's overpurchase of socks. We have had tens of thousands of subscribers to the Awesome Socks Club for a long time now, over 3 years. And we always order a few more socks than we need just in case we have to do returns and stuff. And that overage adds up over the years. And so right now we have some tremendously good deals on those excess socks because we need to get them out of the warehouse. I can't believe I'm saying our warehouse, we're overstocked. We need to get it out of the warehouse. But like Josh, who runs the warehouse, is like, Hank, we need to get these socks out of the warehouse. So we got good sock deals right now. I'll put them in the description. And maybe you can just buy a bunch of socks and give them all away to a bunch of your friends. And also, because we've already paid for these socks, basically all of it for us is profit. And that's good for you and the world because we donate all of our profit to charity. While you're there, you might check out our coffee or our tea or our soap. They're all very good and worth a try and excellent for gifting. All orders over $59 have free shipping domestically right now. And if you use the code SAVE10, you can get 10% off any order over $50. And with SAVE20, you can get 20% off of any order over $100. I'm looking at the map here, thousands of people have used those coupon codes. So don't miss out. We might turn them off soon. Who knows? All right. Good takes. We're going to start with Jamel Bowie on Blue Sky, who says, so far, the only explanation I've seen that doesn't smack of, if only she'd listened to me, she would have won. The first half of that is a great take. I saw so many people who were like, see, I told you wouldn't win if you didn't do what I told you to do. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, like, of course I feel that way. Like, I feel like if she'd been more about the things that I care about the most, that she would have done better because I think I'm like most people, but I'm not. And I saw so many of those takes, and I think that they are useless. And I did not include any of them here because I did not want to deride any specific perspective, and they all came from specific perspectives. So the only explanation that doesn't smack of that is global discontent with incumbents because of inflation and post-pandemic malaise, plus toxic information environments. Maybe we'll do toxic information environment in a second, but we're going to move on first to this similar perspective from Christopher Federico, who says, second, incumbents because of inflation.
This is my take. Basically, global discontent with incumbents because of inflation and post-pandemic malaise. Yeah, pandemic sucked, inflation sucked, also the information environment sucks. True. This is my take. That's my AKA, you can tell, because of the
inflation. On first to this similar perspective from Christopher Federico, who says, people need to discipline themselves against willy-nilly arguments about who or what is to blame for the pro-democracy side. Folks are going to be tempted to alight on whatever's been bothering them about their own side for years. I think that this is wise. The fact of the matter is whoever is holding the political ball when the vibes turn bad is screwed, and whoever the alternative is will benefit, even if they happen to be cranks. And included this from the Financial Times, which shows that every governing party facing election in a developed country this year lost vote share the first time this has ever happened. And it feels like it matters to me. And so if you look at that, you might think, what is it about the US where the incumbent party was so strong? Instead of the way that I think most people are looking at it, which is how on earth did this happen? Now, I think that there are unique circumstances in the US that would make the incumbent party more strong, particularly that Donald Trump is in a way an incumbent in that he has been president before, but he's not the incumbent. And like the reality is that inflation is really hard and the vibes around it are very bad. And I don't think that people understood the extent to which the vibes around it would be very bad. Because, you look at other areas on this graph where inflation was very high back in the early 1980s. And, you see like that clump there in the early 1980s is below average with one outlier, but not like this, not like that. And I think that comes back to what Jamel is saying, that it is it is important to recognize that who's holding the ball when the vibes turn bad is a huge part of this. But in addition, there is the toxic information environment, which I just think is a really real factor right now. We would do well to try and understand it better, which I am doing right now in a script that will hopefully be my vlog this video next week. Kate says on Blue Sky, most of my good takes are from Blue Sky, which is interesting. The right built a powerful partisan and participatory media environment to support its messaging, which offers a compelling, deep story for its participants. The left relied on rigid, self-preserving institutional media, and its story is little more than a defense of imperfect institutions. And I just think that's really spot on. I think it's really hard. We have a toxic information environment that makes it very unpopular to defend institutions. I think we're underestimating the significance of the information environment shift that has occurred over the last 20 years. I think it's very significant. And this makes me think even deeper thoughts about it, especially with respect to how the left kind of can't win nationally, at least, while the story is just the defense of imperfect institutions. I think the word imperfect there is very important. And I think that is kind of the story right now. And if the left wants to win elections, I feel like it's going to have to shift. I didn't include this in here, but I saw a couple of tweets that were basically just like, look, We're gonna have to do populism now. That's the choice we have. And like, I don't necessarily like it as a person who is a kind of defender of imperfect institutions kind of guy, but I think that's right. And then of last, we're gonna look at my friend Technology Connections, who says, for fuck's sake, don't fight over why this happened. Do not make your pet issue your identity. Fucking work together. The wildest thing is lusting for a coalitional form of governance when you can't even form a coalition of friends. Just fantastic string of words there. And I know that Alec doesn't like to be super political on main, so I hope that he's okay with me sharing this. I'll actually check and see if he left it up. He did. And then he said, he did reply to it, and he said, I genuinely hate bringing this tone out, especially on Anil's post. But the time for bickering is over. I'm sorry, it may be over, but it is not going to be over. So I apologize for that generally. I don't know how much I should have made this video. Sense making is important. And one of the ways that we make sense is that we look to the people around us and how they're making sense of the world. And we take that as how we're making sense of the world. But I'm trying to approach information in a way that really is about wanting it to be true, like wanting to believe true things. And that's hard on the internet. And I also want to try and model how I do that when I make content, which is why I'm doing this. This is uncomfortable for me, especially because I'm sure that I'm going to get shouted about a lot of stuff, because there's nothing quite hotter than an election, especially one like this. But I hope that it's valuable. If it doesn't feel valuable, I will take the video down. But that's what we'll do. We'll see.
Coward. All right, let me put this away. We'll keep reading.